All right, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Elvis Photos. Blessed to be here in an area of Florida that's not getting hit by the hurricane, so I hope all your friends and family are safe. We are going to continue the reading of Elvis and Kathy. We certainly got some pretty shocking stories that have happened in here. You know, what happened with Priscilla calling Elvis when he was in Palm Springs with Kathy. And then also Scatter, the monkey. What really happened to Scatter? Which I think, in all honesty, I think one of the Memphis Mafia or somebody at the house killed Scatter. That's what I think. I think he was poisoned or something. So anyhow, let's go ahead and continue this book. All right, we're going to start here, page 81. Oh, sorry. Page 82. So, there were many funny and sad things that happened over the years. And some of those I remember, most I will relate here. So let's continue the story here on page 82. There were just so many funny and sad things that happened over the years, and some of those I remember most I will relate here, but they take place at different times and on different tours. On one occasion, in Elvis's suite, J.D. and the Stamps were gathered around the piano singing Sweet, Sweet Spirit, while the other visitors were mostly chattering away. Elvis became irritated, jumped up on a stool, waved his arms, and hollered at everybody, "Shut up, goddammit! They're singing about Jesus!" A hush fell over the room, and all you could hear was the sound of the lilting spiritual. "Y'all should be quiet," he whispered. "They're singing about Jesus. Come on." Everyone was looking sheepishly at Elvis like he was Moses standing on Mount Sinai. His choice of words struck me as incongruously hilarious, but I did realize that in his own way, he was expressing his reverence for the Lord, and I admired him for this. One funny incident I always remembered that took place in Lake Tahoe. Before a show, J.D., soundman Bill Porter, Bill had engineered earlier hits for Elvis, Roy Orbison, and the Everly Brothers, and I decided to pull a prank on Elvis. Later on stage, during Hawaiian Wedding Song, Elvis looked at me and sang, "I do." Then when I smiled sweetly and opened my mouth to answer him back, it was J.D.'s voice that filled the air with, "I do." Elvis stepped back about 3 feet in shock, then walked off the stage in hysterics. The audience liked our little joke too. This incident happened when we were having a breakfast with the bodyguards in the Vegas penthouse suite dining room. This next one, we had all the time off, and since we hadn't been together for a few weeks, like all family, we were doing a little catching up, especially telling one another about our holidays. Now, the table conversation was a jumble, with everyone talking at once. Evidently, Elvis wanted my attention or more order. At first he hollered, "Listen to me, listen to me." Then he nudged me on the shoulder and said, "Listen to me." I continued my conversation with Charlie, who was at the end of the table. Well, getting nowhere, Elvis reached down, pulled out a small pistol he had begun carrying in his boot, and took some shots at the ceiling. The guys at the table fell on the floor, seeking protection under the table, as pieces of plaster from the ceiling fell all over us. I don't know if it was the numbness or if I was just used to Elvis's unpredictable behavior, but I just sat at the table and kept eating. Finally, the shooting stopped and the guys sheepishly poked their heads up over the height of the table. When I saw Red West staring at me, I simply said, "Red, will you pass me the toast?" Elvis began laughing, and then everyone joined in. Kathy, she is nervous as steel. Nothing bothers Minnie Mouse." Then he reached over and hugged me. Nothing bothers Minnie Mouse? Nerves as steel? He has to be kidding. Interesting. I don't think you've ever heard those stories before. I have not heard those stories before. And, it does show that Elvis Presley, he liked his guns, didn't he? Now, let's go back. Where was he at? Where were they at? Were they sitting around somewhere? He's shooting into the ceiling here. Let's see here. Breakfast with Body in a Las Vegas penthouse suite dining room. Well, I hope nobody was above Elvis. I mean, we've heard stories about Elvis shooting and Linda Thompson almost getting hit. Elvis was certainly full of life, wasn't he? Very unpredictable. All right, page 84. Chapter 4, my candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But all my foes and all my friends, it gives a lovely light. Malay. Much as I love flying, moving from city to city, and waking up to new places every day, being on tour does sap the energy, causes health problems, and even fits of depression. Sometimes I felt as if I didn't belong anywhere, and the only world I knew was a whirlwind of disconnected events, and this world was inhabited only by people working with the show. On a long tour, we were in 21 different cities in 21 days. We would move from time zone to time zone, losing track of days as well as places. It might be 9 a.m. in the city that you departed and still be 9 a.m. when you arrive in the next city, even after flying for 3 hours. Now, being on tour has a multitude of problems one doesn't think of until you realize that during this period you are actually homeless, rootless, where even the time of day seems upside down. I have said that traveling with the Elvis Presley show was a first-class operation, unlike many other tours I had been on. I think the credit for this goes to Elvis, who wanted the best accommodations for himself and his singers and musicians. So, talk about that for just a quick second. You know, I'm a singer. My wife and I are singers, and you get a rider, R-I-D-E-R, when you do a show, and they ask you what you need, what type of rooms, if you have any special requests. Well, that's what she's talking about, that Elvis wanted the best accommodations for himself and his singers and musicians. So essentially, he said, you guys need to treat my guys and gals the same as you treat me. And that's why this was a first-class tour. Most of the time, people in the show were tops in their fields and demanded the best in working conditions while on the road. However, as the tour progresses, minor irritations build up and are magnified. There were no days off. On the 7th day, when we should have had time to rest, we did 2 shows instead. We did not eat properly, did not get enough sleep, and we just learned to live that way, but it wasn't healthy. Colonel Parker and his staff, leaving as usual 1 day ahead of us, checked out all the arrangements, including the theater, the hotel where we stay, the buses that picked us up at the airport, every little detail. That's another thing to kind of talk about. Yes, Colonel Parker's vilified. Yes, I think that Colonel Parker was in it as much for himself, if not more for himself, obviously, than for Elvis. But Colonel Parker did his job. Colonel Parker made sure that the people that he hired went out and made sure everything was exactly as Elvis wanted it. You know, he didn't take any other clients on. And once again, this is not defending Colonel Parker, but just the point of what she's talking about here. And when he did this, it was always his second trip to the city, because even before the tour began and after it was all mapped out, the Colonel would hop on planes and go to every stop on the itinerary, reserving space in hotels and arranging for meals if that was necessary, and many times it was. For instance, if we were going to a college campus, these campuses are sometimes located in small towns that could not accommodate a sudden influx of 100 people. If you're surprised at the number that traveled on the tour, remember, there were singers, the band members, the lighting men, the stage riggers, the sound men, the wardrobe people, and the hairdresser, all necessary in order to put on a quality show. And that begs to another point to get to. The point being that Elvis Presley paid for those 100 people. He also paid for Colonel Parker and the people and all the advanced men that were out there. This is why Elvis Presley could never could never stop. Because on top of all this stuff, you had the expense of Priscilla Presley wanting millions of dollars, exorbitant amounts, wanted loans for her daddy, more money for the divorce, more money for this and that. And of course, Elvis paid for all the expenses that had to do with Lisa, as he should have, traveling back and forth, and many other things for Priscilla that whenever she asked for it, most of the times he would give it. Now, we're not talking about that time in his life right now, but we're talking about what we've talked about on the Rarest Photos channel for several years now. That touring ended up killing Elvis, but Elvis did not feel like he could stop. And that's what she talks about up here, where it talks about you couldn't eat properly, couldn't get enough sleep, and we just learned to live with it, but it wasn't healthy, including Elvis. All right, let's continue with this reading right now. If we played in one small town, that meant double reservations, one hotel room and the city nearest to college, and another place to change in the college town just before the show started. In some smaller towns, the restaurants did not stay open late enough for us to eat, so the colonel or someone on his staff would try to make reservations for us at a restaurant, even if he had to convince the owner to open up especially for the showcast. Right here might be a good place to confess my weakness for hot dogs. Everyone teased me about it, but hot dogs are just something I love. I tried them in every city, and even though the Chicago hot dog is my vote, she's probably meant to write, Chicago hot dog is my favorite. My vote goes to the hot dogs in Minneapolis and Milwaukee. I would rank Chicago third. Denver is almost a tie with Chicago. A funny thing happened during one of my hot dog binges. It was in Denver, and there was a long line waiting for hot dogs, and an Elvis imitator passed by, and everyone went chasing after him. And I felt myself the only one in line. Well, I guess it was because I knew the real Elvis was not even on the showgrounds yet. It passed my mind that we should hire him and travel with us so that I would never have to stand in line for anything. My spirits had improved about going on the road again when I saw how the Colonel and Elvis handled the moving of 80 to 100 people from one city to another. The Colonel and his staff handled a myriad of details. It was amazing how well everything was organized. We put our suitcases outside our door of our room and never had to worry about a thing after that. We just got on a chartered plane and took off. When we got to our destination, the Colonel and members of his staff were always waiting there to give us our room assignments and keys, and then load our luggage onto a bus which took us to the hotel or motel we'd be staying. It was nothing like the other tours I'd been on, where you wrestled with your own baggage, struggled with music portfolios, helped the others with their gear, tried to find transportation, waited long hours at airports, and then found yourself either sleeping on a bus because there were no planes where you're going, or some third-rate hotel, and had no idea you were even arriving. I will say, as much as I hated being on the road, that when you travel with Elvis, everything was almost always first class. He just wouldn't have it any other way. But even relieved of all these details, touring around the country was still a grueling experience. Just a simple thing like getting laundry done required careful planning. I would study my itinerary and determine what city we would be in for a 24-hour period. In the meantime, I accumulated laundry and carried it with me in a plastic bag until we reached the city where we had a longer stay. Immediately, I would give my laundry to the bellboy, who would have it delivered to my room by the next morning before we left. Then there was personal grooming. Well, I kept my hair cut short, but since it's naturally curly, I never had to put it up in rollers before the show or before I went to bed. All I had to do was use a hairdryer after washing, comb it out quickly, and I was ready. At least my hair was ready. No matter how many times you have packed a suitcase and how much experience you have had on the road, your clothes manage to get wrinkled. No, I hate that. I always carried a portable iron with me just in case. The old trick of hanging wrinkled garments in the bathroom and then running hot water in the shower with the bathroom door closed does create steam and sometimes gets the wrinkles and creases out. But some materials won't respond to steam treatment, which means they have to be ironed. So like many people, I'm sensitive to any change in water supply. Water in one city might taste great, but it's treated differently, or perhaps natural contents or chemical treatments vary. So I learned to carry my own bottled water with me wherever I went. Bottled water in the 70s. I don't even recall any of that in the 80s or 90s myself. I never tried to drink tap water in a strange city, so if I didn't have any bottled water, dehydration would result. There was also a theory that one should drink a great deal of water to help with jet lags. But I don't understand that there's anything that really helps or works. Jet lag causes headaches, insomnia, a sense of disorientation, and extreme fatigue. Now, of course, this is all stuff. Kathy's talking about herself, but I think that she's hinting at the fact that she's talking about Elvis. Elvis had to deal with all of this stuff as well. All right, let's go back here. Once you recognize the symptoms, you just learn to live with it the best you can. I know there are diets and preparations you can make to prevent jet lag, but mostly these did not work on the road. For instance, one person suggested you stay awake while in the air. Another friend says you get 12 to 14 hours of sleep before boarding a plane. Yet another says that not eating anything 8 hours before you travel is also a sure cure. Even my chiropractor got into the act when he told me to go barefoot and hold a tree in each city for 10 minutes, and then I'd be okay. But finding a tree in downtown anywhere in the USA is not an easy thing to do. None of these things is practical on the road when you're moving around the country so fast. I'm sure they have some merit for the casual traveler, but not for people who are only averaging 4 hours of sleep a night for 21 nights. Some of my best sleep was aboard a plane. There's no way I could stay awake. You have little control over the kind of food you're going to eat, so any special jet lag diet would only work for someone who takes a plane a few times a year. Now, it may sound like I'm contradicting myself now, because I said our luggage was always ready to go off to the hotel when we arrived. Well, not always. Once in a great while, something would happen, and ours, it would be en route somewhere else or sitting in the airport that we had just left. Now, if you ever have arrived somewhere without your things packed, you know how inconvenient that can be. And if you're going to do a show in 2 hours or even sooner after you land, it is a catastrophe. So to protect myself, I began carrying a small suitcase on board with me. That contained an extra costume as well as makeup, articles in case my own luggage was lost or misplaced. I'll never forget one day we were all sitting around on the bus waiting for the luggage to be transported from the plane to bus. I looked out on the airstrip and saw some poor soul's suitcase come flying down the plane's luggage chute, hit the ground, and split wide open. Clothes were everywhere. I felt sorry for that person, I said to James sitting next to me. Then I realized my underwear, as the men outside were chasing it all over the runway. It was her underwear. Another time we had along a horn player who was new to the group and not quite used to the routine. When he packed his bags an hour early for the luggage call, as was customary, he inadvertently packed his shoes and socks as well. Well, his happy fate was to make the entire trip that day on the streets and the airport on the plane barefoot. Another time, Donnie Sumner, a talented musician and vocalist who is now a minister, was late for the bus. In his desperate attempt to catch up with us as he was pulling away from the curb, gathering speed, he lunged over a hedge growing in front of the hotel. Donnie didn't make it. His foot caught up in the top of the brush, and he ended up doing a cartwheel, trying to catch himself. By this time, we had brought the bus to a halt, and most of us were laughing hysterically until we found out that Donnie had broken his thumb. Ouch. Actually, missing the bus was a fear we all lived with and had recurring, frustrating dreams about. As for food, I also learned that it was either feast or famine. There were times when it was not possible to eat before or after a show because of the time schedules. So I had an emergency portable suitcase packed with soups, nuts, and crackers. Now, with my emergency costume and makeup, my emergency food and my 2 jugs of water plus a coffee pot, I was ready for anything. There were days I felt like a pack mule instead of a singer, as I lugged all of this from city to city, but it beat the alternative of facing hunger or worse, going on stage out of costume, which happened to me once. Oh, and I can't forget my vitamins. I also carried a big supply of protein and various vitamins for every possibility. I think sometimes I took too many, maybe 30 a day, but I survived on the road for 7 years with Elvis, 2 years with the Sandpipers, and a year with the Metropolitan Opera National Company. Not only hard to say right there, but boring music. Very boring, Cassie. So I had to be doing something right. The show was usually over by midnight, and then we would eat and unwind before going to bed. We would have a 7:30 a.m. call to catch the bus to the airport, and even though we would leave orders with the hotel operator not to be disturbed, persistent fans managed to get through on the telephone and disturb our sleep. Though there were times when the singers and band members were separated, usually they had the whole floor marked off just for us, so we could all leave our doors open just before we got ready to leave. On Elvis's floor also, the hallway was buzzing with activity, with everybody laughing and joking, and wardrobe closets being wheeled away. Sometimes we might all have to gather around a TV set in one room, waiting for everything to be loaded. Soon, Charlie would pass by the room. "Okay, boss, everything's ready to go. The bags are all packed and everything's ready." Elvis would be standing there all dressed up, usually wearing a cape. He'd answer loudly, like an army sergeant's command. "Okay, let's move it. Ho!" Then the guys would respond with a "Yo!" back. We'd have to escape the mobs of fans that were waiting outside the hotel entrance whenever we tried to sneak out. There'd be a bus for the group and 2 or 3 limos and a local police escort in front. Now we'd all pile into vehicles. I'd jump in a limo with Elvis, and the screech of tires would still be deafening as we peeled out with the car door still slamming and the police sirens starting to wail. When the motorcade reached the runway and stopped in front of Elvis's jet, we would hear the ear-splitting sound of fans screaming at the top of their lungs. Charlie and Vernon would board the jet first, while the other guys started loading luggage into the freight compartment. Elvis and I would pause at the head of the stairs while he turned around and waved back to his fans, who just went wild. Sometimes, despite the Colonel's organized strategies and best laid plans, we ended up doing some pretty fancy airline acrobatics. We'd fly in just an hour or so before the show, changing our costumes on the plane just as the wheels were touching down. Then we'd jump into the limos, skip the hotel, and go straight to the auditorium, do the show, jump back into the limos, and then take off right again for the next town so we could sleep all night and be ready and refreshed for the next show. This could go on night after night. Let's see what we got here. What other details are coming up? Often, after the show, we would make a mad dash for the cars, and by the time Al Devorn said, Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building, we were already blocks away on our way back to the plane. Of course, when you travel, you're going to have some misadventures, and mistakes are going to be made. One of the funniest was in one of the larger cities in the downtown area. We pulled into the Hilton Hotel at 4 a.m. and we were all dead on our feet. We all took out our little packets with room keys and marched through the lobby and up to the floor. Soon we were lined up in front of our respective rooms, but none of the doors would open. Our keys fit perfectly, and we double-checked the numbers, but they just wouldn't turn the locks and open the doors. Well, big old 6'5" J.D., who we affectionately called Jim Dandy at times, was road-weary and saddled down with several bags and suitcases across his shoulders. He started grumbling and fidgeting, and his hair dryer fell out and hit the floor. That's when he really lost his temper and sent his hefty foot crashing into the wooden door with a loud whack. It sounded like a cannon in a long, quiet hotel hallway. What's wrong here? What's going on? We were all frustrated and bone-tired. The door J.D. was trying to enter slowly creaked open, and a sleepy pair of eyes peered cautiously around the edge of the doorway. Others began to open, but from the inside. There were probably 80 of us simultaneously and sheepishly saying, "Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, pardon us. Please excuse me." Then we quietly assembled at the end of the hall, wondering what to do next. One of us had the presence of mind to inquire downstairs at the desk. "You're at the wrong hotel," he informed us. "What do you mean?" "This is the Hilton, isn't it?" "Yeah," he said, "but there's another Hilton 2 blocks away. That's the one you want." Confused, frustrated, and too tired to argue, our tribe marched out onto the night to find Hilton II. Well, neither Elvis nor I traveled well, but he had a lot more energy than I did. However, one thing that bothered both of us a great deal was the fact that irregular schedules and sleepless nights played havoc with our vocal cords. We needed rest and routine to keep our voices in shape, the same way an athlete does to keep in shape for athletic events. My father, as I mentioned earlier, was a professional singer and voice coach, and when he trained me, he always insisted I get 8 hours of sleep a night. Well, Elvis would notice a difference in his voice, and so would I. However, Elvis could still do a lot more things vocally without getting proper rest than I could, since I'm a soprano and the high, delicate notes go first. After a time on the road, there were parts of my voice that were just not there. I would have to wait until I got home and rested a few days before my vocalization got back to normal. I kept telling Elvis how my father insisted his students get 8 hours of sleep at night. I also pointed out that when I toured with a metropolitan, boring music, Pathy, very boring music, they insisted singers only do major roles once every 3 to 4 days and to get at least 10 hours rest between moves from city to city. I kept after him to talk to Colonel Parker and set his foot down about scheduling so he could get the required amount of rest. Well, Elvis talked to the Colonel, and soon it was arranged for Elvis to stay over in a city and fly to the next show just in time for the performance. So something that Kathy insisted actually worked out. Or he would fly into the next city the night before, where we would find him fully rested when we arrived the next day. The Colonel was a businessman, not an entertainer, and knew little about voices and how delicate the vocal cords really are. When he scheduled the tours, it was obvious that he never considered singers, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know any better. and most business managers don't. Their concern is to make make each concert pay for itself. The Colonel listened to him and made arrangements, but it was too expensive for the entire group to have the same arrangement. From time to time, the Colonel booked us into older, less than first-rate hotels. Sometimes to throw the fans off our trail, sometimes to repay a favor to an old buddy. It may have worked out well for his purposes, but wasn't really the greatest experience in the world for us, especially after an endless string of one-nighters. I was with the gang on the show bus in Cincinnati when we pulled into the driveway of a pretty creaky and spooky-looking motel. Someone said, "Oh no, the Colonel's up to his old tricks again." After we were certain that it was indeed the right place, we checked in. At about 6:30 p.m., we were back on the bus again, ready to head off to the show, when someone looked out the window and saw a man who looked remarkably like Elvis, marching down the street wearing pajamas and a very determined look. Of course, the man we saw was Elvis. And later he explained to me what happened. Let me tell you something, honey. Sometimes those guys don't really understand me when I talk. I told them flat out to get me out of that flea bag. But I guess they all figured I was just talking to keep myself company, so finally I got up and split right out of there. Well, when we happened to play small towns, and about 100 of us walked into a restaurant at one time, went and breakfast, we sometimes pitched in and helped the restaurant cook. The cook needed help, and so did the waitresses, because they weren't set up for that big of an influx of people all at one time. We would run around with paper and pads, taking orders, or help fry the eggs, make omelets, pancakes, and pour coffee. Everyone got into the spirit of the occasion, and we all had fun. It was a real change from room service and a lot of laughs. For a change of pace, Vernon and I managed to get out several times and buy pajamas for Elvis. He favored a particular style, one being powder blue with navy piping. Staying 5 weeks in Vegas, I always felt as if I were serving a jail sentence in a very elegant, posh institution. I would rather be traveling than living like a prisoner looking at four walls. If cleanliness is next to godliness, then I was an angel, material on the road. I took a shower when I got up, a shower before the show, or when I got to the hotel, and a hot bath after the show. The hot lights and the wild performances made a bath after each show imperative, so I took 3 to 4 baths a day. How clean can you get? And then there are more health problems on the road. We ran fast and moved into every imaginable climate extreme. We would be in air conditioning, then smoke-filled, humid arenas or auditoriums, cold auditoriums, freezing or boiling hot dressing rooms, and then into the snow, followed by a day of tropical climate. All of this can lead to sinus and bronchial infection, the worst version. The worst of which is commonly referred to by entertainers as Vegas stroke, the most feared enemy of any singer. Elvis and I used his prescription Decadron inhalers to help clear our lungs and open bronchial passages. But then one time Elvis introduced me to the funniest remedy. He called them saltwater douches. Now, to anyone outside the world of professional singers, this remedy will appear somewhat crude. However, vocalists have to learn tricks in order to keep it going on night after night. The first time he introduced me to this cure was in Las Vegas. "Come here, stuffy nose," he said as he led me to his bathroom. Both of us sounded as if we had our nasal cavities full of cotton. "Man, I'm miserable. My throat is just as raw as a skin rabbit. How about yours?" "But I got something that'll fix us both up," he mumbled. "Now watch me," he demonstrated. "You sprinkle salt into a glass of warm water just like this. Here you go. One for you, one for me. Then you pour a little of it," swirling the glass around, "in the palm of your hand." Well, I copied his actions. Then he went on with his treatment lesson. "Now get ready. You inhale this shit up your nose like this. Bend over quick." Well, we both leaned over as far as we could, and if you want to know the truth, it burned like hell. "Hold that position, baby. It burns, but hold it. Now blow your nose in the sink. Now follow me. We got to exercise hard and fast. Ride this bike. Soon all that junk's going to break loose and your nose will open." Well, that was Elvis's stuffy nose treatment, and by golly, it worked. Now, temporary relief, but it still worked. I can remember standing. Let's see here. 1 second. Sorry about that. I can remember standing on cold stages where the lower part of me was freezing cold and the top of me was burning up from the lights. The Colonel and the Elvis also allowed audiences to take flash photographs. And while we stood there freezing and suffocating simultaneously, thousands of flash bulbs with their intense bluish-white light went off continuously for over an hour and a half, bringing on partial blindness for several hours after the show was over. I kept seeing black and red spots before my eyes, even when I was in bed trying to go to sleep. Now, once again, that's something Elvis had to deal with, and that's really messed with his glaucoma, didn't it? Probably brought it on. I kept seeing black and red spots before my eyes, even before I was in bed trying to go to sleep. But there is humor, even in chaos. Thousands in the audience had binoculars to get a better look at Elvis. When we looked back at them, and the light bounced off those binoculars, Elvis decided they looked like frogs out there staring at us. It was truly a peculiar sight. I don't think I'll ever forget one night in Jackson, Mississippi. We'd just been in tornado weather, and when we got in the auditorium, it was real hot and humid and muggy. They'd left all the doors open to let some air into the place, and there were hundreds upon hundreds of flies swarming and circling in the bright lights in the center stage all around Elvis. He was trying to be real cool about it and ignore them. But I was afraid he was going to inhale or swallow or choke on all these flies. Well, I noticed a man standing just off the side of the stage with a fly swatter. I walked over and got it from him, and while Elvis sang, I began to swat at the air at Elvis, hitting just as many as I could. I tried to make it look like a joke, and he played it up with me, but I was serious. He could have easily inhaled them. Although the flies were more of an isolated experience, one thing we encountered everywhere we went was the overwhelming noise level. The unbelievable noise from the screaming audience, which sounded like thunder and felt like an earthquake on the stage, combined with the band music coming out of the monitors, would cause a temporary deafness in my ears each night when the show was over. All of this physical abuse was bound to take its toll. Once in Vegas, I had the London flu so bad that I could not leave my bed for several days. I worked when I should have been in a hospital, where I would have been if I had any other kind of job. But in my business, the show must go on. I wonder why, after all these years, we in show business foster that attitude. We aren't doing ourselves any good. We are ruining our health now and for the future. We are doing it for our fans, but wouldn't our fans rather forgo seeing a performance just once in order to assure that we'd be available for a longer period of time? Of course, this is just wishful thinking on my part. Many of Elvis's fans came from far and wide just to see him perform live once. People who had been listening to his records for years. They came for a date with him, and he could not and would not break that date with him, no matter how poorly he felt. It's a great place to talk about it. Elvis loved us fans. He loved you guys. When he was sick, when he couldn't go on, he did go on. He didn't go on for himself, for his ego, for his pride. He went on for y'all. He went on because he knew just how much you sacrificed to go to a show, to buy the tickets, to arrange for travel, to drive there, babysitters. And that was the most important thing to him, was to make sure that you all had, what you needed from him. So let's continue a little bit more. Although he had congenital physical problems, I know his life on the road contributed to his eventual ill health, and I know what it has done to me. I think this show business philosophy is something that needs to be reevaluated. The show must go on, but it should never really be at the expense of putting a performer in an early grave. One saving grace is that we never flew commercial airlines. Elvis's own plane, the Lisa Marie, named after his daughter, was elegant, mostly in blues and greens, and a lot of high-quality suede. It had a kitchen and a comfortable lounge area. He had a bedroom and even a dressing room on board. This is where we're going to stop, folks. And I hope you are safe down in Florida. I hope that you are enjoying this book, Elvis and Kathy. We can read a few of the reviews here in the back. So, you can count on one hand the people qualified to talk about Elvis. And you can count on the fact that Kathy Westmoreland knows what she's talking about. Charlie Hodge. The city of Tupelo is indeed grateful to Kathy Westmoreland for her role in dedication of the Elvis Presley Memorial Chapel. We are always honored to have her in Tupelo because of her dedication to her most famous native son, Elvis Presley, Jack Marshall. So I know I've read some of this before. Wayne Newton. My love and respect for Elvis as an entertainer, but more importantly as a friend, has been many times a beacon of light in a misty world for me. In retrospect, we realized Elvis was a blessing with many talents. One of the most admirable was his ability to recognize and utilize great talents around him. each in their own way the best of a champion team. Kathy Westmoreland is the best, and no man's immortality can fade, as long as those who loved him and carry on those morals, principles, and standards of perfection and giving do so with all these loving qualities she exemplifies. When history is written, it is sometimes neither just nor kind. For Elvis, it doesn't have to be, as his history will be forced to admit that those who knew him and loved him have picked up the torch and marched on. Wayne Newton, performing artist. Well, I think I might have a little bit of the Vegas stroke from all this reading and being down here at the beach and the salt water and stuff. But I want to keep reading for y'all, and just let me know. Let me know in the comments if you made it all the way to the end. This is Rare Elvis Photos, bringing you Elvis and Kathy.